Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Office Hours with the Professor. As always, I'm your host, William the Professor Collis, and I want to get right into our story this week, and that is game sales are down. This comes from a Sports Business Journal article, which is commenting on NPD data, and apparently for the month of April, game sales are down 8% compared to the same month last year to 4.3 billion. And in fact, year-to-date sales for games are also down 8% to 18.3 billion. I first want to start this article with just an early comment, which is a little bit facetious, but I sort of mean it. It's a little bit who cares? Because the reality is lots of industries are down. There's a lot going on in our world today, and 4.3 billion for a single month of sales is still a huge number. The other piece about this is in the NPD data, not necessarily all digital game sales are included. So particularly as more and more game sales shift to digital, I'm more and more skeptical of sort of the magnitude of this trend. Are game sales probably down year on year? Yes. Is it something we should be worried about as an industry? No. So you might say, well, William, why did you want to do this story at all then, if your comment is, who cares, game sales are down? And the answer is because I want to talk about the sales of two specific games. I want to talk about the sales of Horizon Forbidden West and Elden Ring, because I would argue that these games are pretty similar. They're both very deep, involved RPGs, and they're both actually surprisingly large. I would also argue that they're both absolutely incredible games. I played both. I found each of them to just be real masterworks that clearly their developers put just so much passion and love into. However, I think if you look at the sales data for these games, you see sort of an interesting story. So Elden Ring has sold incredibly well. In April, it was the second best-selling game of the month, and I believe the prior month it was number one. And this is after launching sort of towards the end of February, so this is basically launch month sales data. In contrast, Horizon Forbidden West was the fifth most popular game in March, and down to the seventh best or most popular games selling in April. And you know, you could argue that these numbers are good for Forbidden West because it is a console exclusive. And that's certainly true to some extent. But you do see console exclusives like, say, Kirby and the Forbidden Lands cracking the top three. I would argue that Horizon Forbidden West should be selling better than it is. And I would argue that reason is Elden Ring, because they're really going after the same consumers. And I think Elden Ring has kind of sucked up the gamer zeitgeist about that phenomenal, largely single-player driven RPG experience. So why did I want to talk about this? I want to talk about this because this highlights something to me that I think is becoming an increasing problem in our industry: the difficulty of finding launch windows for games. Like, let's just be honest, the games calendar is getting more and more crowded. It used to be, I remember a time when there was a real post-holiday slump, when nothing really important would launch in February. And now, you can just look at the launch calendar. You had some stunning games like Horizon and Elden Ring coming out in that time period. And I would also argue, if you were a marketer working on Horizon Forbidden West, that February launch window probably felt pretty safe to you. I'd rather go up against something like Elden Ring than, say, Call of Duty, right? I think, there's always going to be competitors out there. I think Elden Ring probably felt relatively safe. And I even see, some intelligent decisions made around the exact launch timing, with Horizon choosing to go out a week before Elden Ring. Better to launch first if you can. So I think it's a relatively intelligent and well-chosen launch timing. It just shows the difficulty of even getting a AAA console title like Horizon into a calendar where it can find breathing room to get the full credit for the excellent game it is, and candidly get the appreciation it deserves. This is another factor limiting our industry. It's not just big budgets, it's not just long dev times, it's not just the complexity of launching AAA games, it's literally how do you find a window to get your AAA game to breathe in. And I think the conflict between Horizon and Elden Ring perfectly illustrates just how crowded we are as a market, and candidly how tough it is for new or innovative IPs to even find a launch window to break in. Basically, if you aren't an established AAA game with a preset launch timing, it's just really hard to find a moment for you to breathe in the sun. So I think it's just a fun little story I wanted to talk about, highlighting, I think, a little bit of a less traveled angle on sales data in our games industry. So I hope you enjoyed this week's Office Hours, and I look forward to seeing you next week.